I sat at my father's dining table on what I thought would be a normal Sunday dinner, watching my brother Jason smirk across from me while Dad cleared his throat. The words that came next felt like a punch to the gut. "Your brother needs the mansion more," Dad declared, his voice firm and final. "He has 3 kids. You're alone. It's decided." I glanced toward the window and saw 2 moving trucks already parked on the street, engines idling. My sister Amber nodded in agreement, while Jason's wife Stephanie smiled knowingly. They had planned this without telling me. I stayed quiet, pulled out my phone, and opened the app showing my real estate portfolio. 11 properties, all owned by me, all currently occupied by family members who had no idea I was their landlord. I opened my mouth to respond, but Dad raised his hand to silence me. He launched into an explanation about how Jason's business had failed, how he was drowning in debt from bad investments and poor decisions, how he desperately needed the mansion to keep his family off the streets. Mom chimed in from the kitchen doorway, her voice sharp with accusation. "You've always been selfish, Hayden. Think of the children for once in your life. Don't you care about your nephews and niece?" My sister Amber sat beside Jason, nodding vigorously. She called me ungrateful for everything the family had supposedly done for me over the years. I tried to cut in, to explain that I had bought the mansion myself 5 years ago with money I earned from my tech consulting business. I was 27 when I purchased it, paid every mortgage payment myself, maintained it, lived in it occasionally as an investment property. But Dad waved off my protests like they were meaningless. "We're family," he said, leaning back in his chair with an expression of absolute certainty. "What's yours is ours. That's how it works. You'll understand someday when you have a family of your own." I stood up from the table, my napkin falling to the floor. This was insane. The mansion was worth $2.3 million. It had 7 bedrooms, an Olympic-sized pool, a home theater, a wine cellar I had stocked myself. I had worked 80-hour weeks for years to afford it. And now they were just taking it? Jason finally spoke, his voice oily with false concern. "Hayden, don't make this harder than it needs to be." He reached into a briefcase beside his chair and pulled out a stack of papers. "We already have the paperwork done." His smile widened as he slid the documents across the table toward me. I picked them up, my hands starting to shake. It was a quitclaim deed. My signature was at the bottom, transferring all ownership of the mansion to Jason Cooper. Except I had never signed this document. I had never even seen it before this moment. "I never signed this," I said, holding it up. "This is fraud." Jason's lawyer friend Brian, who I now noticed sitting in the corner of the dining room, stepped forward. "The signature looks pretty authentic to me, Hayden. And it's already been filed with the county recorder's office. 3 days ago, actually. Legally speaking, your brother owns the mansion now." My vision tunneled. They had planned this meticulously. Jason must have practiced forging my signature, probably stole a document from my home office during one of the family gatherings I had hosted. The deed had already been filed, which meant on paper, according to county records, Jason was the legal owner of my property. "You can't do this," I said, my voice rising. "This is forgery. This is theft. I'll take you to court. I'll have you arrested." Dad laughed, actually laughed. "You're going to sue your own family? Over a house? That's low, even for you, Hayden." He shook his head in disgust. "I raised you better than this." The entire family turned on me then. Amber brought up how I had never helped with Dad's hardware store business when I was younger, how I had abandoned the family to pursue my career in the city, how I never came to family events anymore. Jason's wife Stephanie started crying, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue she pulled from her purse. She talked about their children potentially being homeless, about how they had nowhere else to go, about how I was being cruel and heartless. Mom guilt tripped me about all the sacrifices they had supposedly made for me growing up. Never mind that I had put myself through college with scholarships and 3 part-time jobs. Never mind that I had built my consulting business from absolutely nothing, working out of a studio apartment for the first 2 years. Jason revealed more of his plan. He was $470,000 in debt from gambling at the Riverside Casino. He had maxed out every credit card, taken out personal loans he couldn't repay, borrowed from dangerous people. His plan was to take out a home equity loan against my mansion, use the money to pay off his debts, and start fresh. Dad endorsed this plan completely, nodding along like it made perfect sense. "You can afford another house, Hayden," Dad said. "Your brother can't. This is about family taking care of family." They began discussing how to redecorate. Stephanie wanted to repaint my home office for the children, turn it into a playroom. Jason talked about replacing the furniture, getting rid of my belongings, making it truly theirs. Amber suggested they host the next Thanksgiving there, make new memories in the beautiful space. I made a decision in that moment. I stood up calmly, tucked my phone back into my pocket, and looked at each of them in turn. "You've all made a terrible mistake," I said quietly. The family laughed. Jason actually slapped the table. "What are you going to do, Hayden? You've got nothing. The house is mine. Deal with it." I walked out of that dining room, got into my car, and sat in the driver's seat for a moment. Then I pulled out my phone and opened my email. I sent 11 emails in rapid succession, each one to a different property management company I worked with across the city. Each email contained the same instruction in the subject line and body. Initiate eviction proceedings immediately. 30-day notice, as required by state law. No exceptions. Send documentation to all tenants at the following addresses. I attached the list of 11 properties. Dad's 4-bedroom colonial where we had just eaten dinner. Jason's current rental, a 3-bedroom townhouse across town. Amber's apartment in the Arts District. Aunt Patricia, and her husband's ranch house. Cousin Dylan's studio near the university. Uncle Frank's duplex. My brother-in-law Gary's commercial space for his auto repair shop. 4 more properties housing extended family members, cousins and uncles and aunts, who had always treated me like I was less than them. I had been their landlord for 5 years. None of them knew. I had kept the rents low, been lenient about late payments, fixed things quickly when they broke. I had operated through property management companies, never putting my own name on the communications. It was a courtesy, a way of helping family without making them feel like charity cases. That courtesy ended tonight. I drove away from Dad's house, not to the mansion they were planning to steal, but to my actual residence, a penthouse downtown they didn't know existed. The mansion had been an investment property, a place I occasionally stayed but never truly lived. My real home was a modern penthouse with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, and my family had no idea it existed. I parked in my private garage, rode the elevator up to the 23rd floor, and walked into my apartment. I poured myself a drink and stood at the window, looking out at the city lights. Tomorrow morning, 11 eviction notices would arrive at 11 different addresses, and my family would finally understand exactly who they had been dealing with. The next morning arrived faster than I expected. My phone started ringing at 6:30, call after call that I let go to voicemail. I was sitting at my kitchen counter, drinking coffee, and reading the news on my tablet when the messages started flooding in. Angry texts from Dad, panicked calls from Amber, confused voicemails from Uncle Frank asking what was happening. By 9 o'clock, all 11 eviction notices had been delivered. I knew because I had requested delivery confirmation from each property management company. The notices were formal, legal, and completely airtight. Each one gave exactly 30 days to vacate the premises or face legal eviction proceedings. Each one was signed by the property owner, which the documents listed as various LLCs I had set up years ago: Cooper Holdings LLC, Summit Properties LLC, Riverside Real Estate Trust. Dad was the first to figure it out. He had connections at City Hall from his years running the hardware store, knew people in the clerk's office who could pull property records. By 10 o'clock, he had traced every single LLC back to me. Every property had me listed as the registered agent. Every piece of paperwork led back to Hayden Cooper. The phone calls intensified. Dad showed up at the mansion, pounding on the door, but found it empty. I had never actually lived there, just used it occasionally for entertaining clients or as a quiet workspace. My family had assumed it was my primary residence, because it was the only address they knew. They had no idea where I actually lived. Dad tried using his contacts to find my real address, but I had been careful. The penthouse was owned by another LLC. Utility bills went to a P.O. box. My driver's license still listed an old address from years ago that I had never updated. I had learned to be private, to keep my real life separate from family drama. The family discovered that the 11 properties combined were worth $8.7 million. Uncle Frank's duplex alone was worth $750,000. Dad's colonial was worth $1.1 million. The commercial space Gary used for his auto repair shop was worth $600,000. They had been living in my properties, building their lives in buildings I owned, never once suspecting the truth. I let them stew for 3 days. My phone rang constantly, but I never answered. Then, on Thursday afternoon, I received a notification that made my blood run cold. Jason's lawyer, Brian, had filed an emergency motion in court. I opened the attached documents and read through them with growing disbelief. The motion claimed I had fraudulently acquired all 11 properties using family members' identities. It alleged identity theft, fraud, forgery. It presented the forged quitclaim deed from the mansion as evidence of my supposed pattern of document forgery. The logic was twisted but clever. If I claimed my signature on the mansion deed was forged, then I must be experienced in forgery myself. Therefore, I must have forged documents to steal the properties from family members. Brian had filed the motion specifically in Judge Hartman's court. I didn't know it then, but Judge Hartman and Brian were college fraternity brothers. They had business dealings together, shared investments, belonged to the same private club. The fix was already in before I even knew there was a game being played. The emergency hearing was scheduled for Friday morning, less than 24 hours away. I called my attorney, Douglas Grant, a real estate litigation specialist I had worked with on property acquisitions. Douglas reviewed the motion and assured me it was nonsense, that we had ironclad documentation proving legitimate ownership of every property. I had purchased each property at fair market value over a 5-year period. I had mortgage records, title insurance, closing documents, tax returns showing the income and expenses. Every transaction was clean, legal, thoroughly documented. Douglas prepared our opposition, attached copies of everything, and filed it with the court Thursday evening. I felt confident going into Friday morning. I had the truth on my side, and truth had to matter in court. Thursday night, while I was reviewing documents with Douglas at his office, Brian and Jason met with Judge Hartman at his private club. They sat in leather chairs in a wood-paneled room, drinking expensive scotch and discussing how to handle me. Judge Hartman's son had worked for one of Jason's previous businesses before it failed. There were connections, favors owed, the kind of backroom dealings that happen when powerful people want to protect their own. Brian presented forged documents he and Jason had created, fake partnership agreements suggesting family members had been silent partners in my property acquisitions, fake loan documents showing family members contributing money to purchases, bank statements that had been altered to show transactions that never happened. Everything was backdated, made to look authentic, designed to create just enough doubt about my claims. Judge Hartman looked through the fabricated evidence and nodded. These were his people, his fraternity brother and his fraternity brother's client. I was an outsider, someone trying to hurt a family that was just trying to stay together. He agreed to rule in their favor. The fix was in, and I had no idea what was waiting for me in the morning. Friday morning I arrived at the courthouse with Douglas. We carried 2 briefcases full of documentation. We were prepared, confident, ready to defend against the ridiculous allegations. The family arrived with Brian, all of them dressed formally, putting on a show for the court. The hearing began, and I felt my confidence start to crack immediately. Judge Hartman barely looked at our evidence when Douglas presented it. He kept interrupting, asking hostile questions, treating me like I was the criminal instead of the victim. When Brian presented his forged partnership documents, Judge Hartman examined them carefully, nodding along as if they were obviously authentic. Douglas objected repeatedly, pointing out that the documents were suspicious, poorly forged, unsigned in some cases, undated in others. Judge Hartman overrules every objection. He allowed all of Brian's evidence without any scrutiny, while dismissing our legitimate documentation as potentially fabricated. I sat there watching a judge systematically ignore the truth and embrace lies. It was surreal, like being in a nightmare where the rules of reality no longer applied. Judge Hartman ruled from the bench immediately, not even taking time to review everything properly. He froze all 11 properties, preventing any eviction proceedings from moving forward. He ordered a forensic investigation into my supposedly fraudulent acquisition of the properties. And then, he dropped the bomb that destroyed me. He appointed Jason as temporary administrator of all 11 properties. Jason would control all property management decisions, collect all rents, handle all maintenance and repairs. I was ordered to turn over all keys, all documents, all access to the properties within 24 hours. The courtroom erupted. My family cheered like they had won the lottery. They hugged Jason, congratulated him, celebrated their victory over me. I sat frozen in my chair, unable to process what had just happened. Douglas immediately filed a notice of appeal, but appeals take months. In the meantime, Judge Hartman's order stood. I had just lost control of my entire real estate portfolio in a single court hearing based on obvious lies. Outside the courthouse, Dad gloated. "You tried to destroy this family," he said, getting in my face. "Now you have nothing. We protected each other from you. That's what real family does." Mom refused to even look at me. Amber posted on social media about how justice had been served against her greedy brother who had tried to make the family homeless. Local news picked up the story. The headline read, "Man attempts to evict entire family, loses everything." I was portrayed as the villain, the heartless businessman trying to hurt his own relatives over money. My girlfriend Emily tried to comfort me that night, but I could barely speak. I sat in my penthouse staring at the wall, trying to understand how everything had gone so wrong so fast. Over the next week, Jason abused his administrator position in ways I couldn't have imagined. He raised everyone's rent to market rate but kept the money for himself, instead of paying property expenses. He stopped paying the mortgages on the 7 properties that still had loans. He stopped paying property taxes. He stopped paying insurance premiums. Every dollar of rental income, $23,000 monthly, went straight into his pocket. My credit score plummeted as mortgages became delinquent. Banks sent default notices. My business suffered next. Clients who saw the news stories started questioning my character. Was I really the kind of person who would try to evict his own family? 3 major clients canceled contracts worth $200,000 annually. Business partners distanced themselves, stopped returning my calls. My consulting business, which I had built over 10 years, started falling apart. Without that income, I couldn't make the mortgage payment on my penthouse. The building had a monthly payment of $4,200. I had always paid it easily from my business income. Now I had nothing coming in. I had $8,000 in my personal bank account. That was all I could access, because the court had frozen my business accounts pending the investigation into my supposed fraud. Emily offered to help with money. I refused. I couldn't drag her into this disaster. I needed to fix it myself. Meanwhile, Jason met with a shady real estate investor named Marcus Vaughn. They made a deal over drinks at an expensive restaurant. Marcus would buy the properties from Jason at 60% of market value. They would split the proceeds. It was completely illegal, since Jason was only a temporary administrator and had no authority to sell. But Jason thought Judge Hartman would protect him. 10 days after the hearing, I got served with another lawsuit. Jason was suing me personally for defamation and emotional distress. He was seeking $5 million in damages for the eviction notices I had sent, claiming they had caused him severe anxiety, panic attacks, emotional trauma. The lawsuit claimed Stephanie needed therapy because of my actions. It claimed the children were suffering emotional damage. The legal fees were crushing me. Douglas wanted a $30,000 retainer for the defamation case. I didn't have it. My assets were frozen. My business was dying. I was barely surviving. Emily came to my penthouse that night and suggested I settle everything. Apologize to the family, walk away, start over somewhere else. I looked at her and realized she didn't understand. I was innocent. I had done nothing wrong. I wasn't going to surrender to lies and fraud, but I was trapped. I had no money to fight with, no way to defend myself properly, and a legal system that had turned against me. That night, someone posted my penthouse address online. A social media account I didn't recognize shared the address with the caption, "This is where the man who tried to make his family homeless lives. Luxury penthouse, while his brother's children suffer." I lay awake that night wondering how much worse things could possibly get. 3 weeks after Judge Hartman's initial ruling, I stood in a different courthouse for what I hoped would be a chance to present the full truth. Douglas had managed to get a hearing on our motion to reconsider, scheduled in front of Judge Hartman again. Douglas had explained that getting a different judge this early in the process was nearly impossible due to case assignment rules. I walked into that courtroom on a Thursday morning, feeling cautiously optimistic. We had organized all our evidence more clearly, prepared a detailed presentation showing the legitimate purchase of each property. Douglas had bank statements, wire transfer records, closing documents, everything needed to prove beyond doubt that I had lawfully acquired every single property. My family arrived with Brian looking confident, almost smug. That should have been my first warning. Judge Hartman called the hearing to order, and I noticed immediately that his demeanor toward me was even more hostile than before. When Douglas stood to present our evidence, Judge Hartman kept interrupting with questions that seemed designed to confuse rather than clarify. Then Brian stood to present what he called new evidence. He pulled out documents that I had never seen before, partnership agreements that supposedly showed family members as co-investors in my property acquisitions. The documents had signatures, dates, notary stamps. They looked official. Douglas objected immediately, pointing out that we had never been provided these documents during discovery, that they appeared to be recently created, that the paper stock looked wrong for documents allegedly created 5 years ago. Judge Hartman overruled every objection. Brian presented bank statements that seemed to show transfers from family members to my accounts around the times I purchased properties. I knew they were fabricated because those transfers never happened, but they looked convincing enough to create doubt. What happened next felt like watching a car crash in slow motion. Judge Hartman ignored all of Douglas's evidence and accepted all of Brian's suspicious documents as fact. He ruled that there was sufficient evidence of potential fraud to warrant an extended investigation. He maintained the freeze on all properties. And then he went further. Judge Hartman stripped me of all property control indefinitely and confirmed Jason as permanent administrator until the investigation concluded. Jason was given explicit authority to manage the properties as he saw fit, which Judge Hartman said included the right to sell properties if necessary for prudent asset management. I couldn't breathe. Douglas was objecting frantically, but Judge Hartman just kept talking, issuing orders that destroyed everything I had built. The courtroom spun around me. Outside the courthouse, the family celebrated openly. Dad shook Jason's hand like he had just won a championship. Mom actually smiled at Jason with pride I had never seen her direct at me. Amber hugged Stephanie, while the kids ran around excitedly, not understanding what any of this meant. Local news cameras captured everything. That night, the story ran again. Updated headline: Judge rules against man who tried to evict family. The reporter described me as someone who had attempted to fraudulently claim ownership of family properties. My business collapsed completely over the next 2 weeks. Every single client terminated their contracts. My business partners held a vote and removed me from the company I had founded. They bought me out for $10,000. The company was worth at least $400,000, but they knew I was desperate and had no leverage. I took the money because I needed it to survive. My credit cards maxed out from legal fees. I was paying Douglas from the buyout money and it was disappearing fast. The penthouse mortgage payment came due and I couldn't make it. The bank sent a notice of default. I had 60 days before foreclosure proceedings would begin. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was about to be evicted from my own home while trying to evict family members from my properties. Emily started avoiding my calls. When we finally met at a coffee shop near her office, She looked uncomfortable before she even sat down. She explained that my family had contacted her. Dad had called her directly, found her number somehow. He had explained his version of events, painting me as someone who had always been troubled and manipulative. Amber had found Emily on social media and sent her long messages. She told Emily that I had a pattern of using people, that I had scammed an elderly neighbor years ago, that my family had been covering for my bad behavior for years. It was all lies, complete fabrications, but Emily admitted she didn't know what to believe anymore. The court had ruled against me, Emily said, stirring her coffee without drinking it. Judges don't just rule like that without reason. Maybe there's something to what your family is saying. I tried to explain, but she cut me off. She couldn't be with someone involved in this kind of situation. Her own family had seen the news stories and were pressuring her to end the relationship. She stood up, apologized, and walked out of the coffee shop. I sat alone at that table for an hour, watching people live their normal lives while mine disintegrated. Jason wasted no time exercising his administrator authority. He sold the first property within a week of getting permanent control. Uncle Frank's duplex, worth $750,000, sold to one of Marcus Vaughn's shell companies for $450,000, 60% of market value, a clearly suspicious transaction. Uncle Frank got evicted in the process. He called me, confused and angry, asking why I was letting this happen. I tried to explain I had no control anymore, but he didn't believe me. He thought I was punishing him somehow. Douglas filed an emergency motion to stop the sales. Judge Hartman denied it, ruling that Jason had authority to manage the assets however he deemed necessary. Over 3 weeks, Jason sold 4 properties total. Each one went to Marcus Vaughn's network of shell companies at below-market prices. The sales totaled $2.1 million. Jason and Marcus split the money according to their agreement. Jason used his share to pay off his $470,000 in gambling debts. He bought himself a brand-new Lexus SUV. He took the family on vacation to Hawaii. He posted photos on social media, pictures of the beach, expensive dinners, the kids playing in the ocean. The captions talked about fresh starts and family blessings. Meanwhile, I was living in my penthouse with the utilities shut off because I couldn't pay the bills. I was eating at a soup kitchen downtown, embarrassed but hungry. I had $300 left to my name. Then something changed. I got a phone call from an attorney named Rachel Thompson. She explained that she had seen my case in the court filings and believed I was being railroaded. She specialized in judicial corruption cases and had been tracking Judge Hartman for years. I've suspected he was corrupt for a long time, Rachel said, but I've never had enough evidence to prove it. Your case might be the one that finally exposes him. She offered to take my case pro bono. She reviewed all my documentation and confirmed immediately that everything about my property acquisitions was legitimate. The family's partnership documents were obvious forgeries. She hired a forensic document examiner named Dr. Elizabeth Santos, who analyzed the paper, ink, and printing methods used in the suspicious documents. Dr. Santos's report was damning. The partnership agreements had been created recently using modern printing techniques and paper stock that didn't match documents from 5 years ago. The signatures were forgeries. The whole thing was a fraud. Rachel also discovered that Judge Hartman and Brian had vacationed together in the Bahamas the previous year. She found photos on social media showing them at the same resort, sitting together at a beach bar, clearly friends rather than just professional acquaintances. For the first time in weeks, I felt hope. Real, tangible hope. Rachel planned to file a motion for reconsideration with all the new evidence. She would also file a formal complaint against Judge Hartman with the State Judicial Ethics Board. That night, I went back to my dark, cold penthouse, feeling like maybe I could win this fight. Maybe justice would prevail after all. I walked into my building, rode the elevator up, unlocked my door, and immediately knew something was wrong. The door frame was splintered. Someone had broken in. My apartment had been ransacked. Every drawer pulled out, every cabinet opened, papers scattered everywhere. My computer was gone. My backup hard drives were missing. The file cabinets where I kept all my property documents had been emptied completely. All of Rachel's evidence was gone. The forensic examiner's report about the forged documents, the photos of Judge Hartman and Brian together. Every piece of documentation that could prove my case had been stolen. I called the police and filed a report. They took notes, said they would investigate, but I could tell from their expressions they weren't going to find anything. The building's security cameras had mysteriously malfunctioned that evening. No footage existed of anyone entering or leaving. I knew Jason had arranged this, or someone working for him, but I couldn't prove it. Rachel called the next morning, and I had to tell her everything was gone. She said she could still fight without the physical evidence, but it would be much harder. The forensic examiner could recreate her report from memory and notes, but it wouldn't have the same impact without the actual documents to examine. That afternoon, I received the foreclosure notice on my penthouse. I had 30 days to vacate. In 1 month, I would be homeless. I sat on the floor of my destroyed apartment, surrounded by the wreckage of my life, and wondered if there was any point in continuing to fight. 4 weeks after the break-in, I was living in my penthouse with no heat, no electricity, and no hope of keeping it. The bank had shut off utilities when I missed the second mortgage payment. I couldn't afford food, so I walked 3 miles each way to a soup kitchen downtown twice a day. I had lost 30 pounds. My clothes hung loose on my frame. I stopped shaving because I couldn't afford razors. I still met with Rachel every few days at the public library. She was working tirelessly to reconstruct our case, but it was like building a house from memory after the original blueprints had been destroyed. She needed me to remember every detail of every property purchase, every document, every transaction. We created affidavits trying to recreate what had been stolen. My consulting business was completely dead. The partners had officially dissolved the company I founded. Clients had moved on to competitors. My professional reputation was destroyed. Every Google search of my name brought up articles about the failed eviction attempt, the court ruling against me, the implication that I had tried to defraud my own family. My business credit cards were maxed out from legal fees I had paid before everything collapsed. Personal credit cards were maxed trying to keep myself fed and housed. I was down to my last $100 in cash. One night, I saw Jason's new Lexus SUV parked outside a downtown bar. Something inside me snapped. I had been walking past, on my way back to my cold penthouse after another meal at the soup kitchen, and seeing that luxury vehicle purchased with money stolen from me was too much. I went into the bar and found Jason at a table with friends, drinking expensive scotch, laughing about something. When he saw me, his expression shifted to something like amusement mixed with contempt. I confronted him in the parking lot as he was leaving. I demanded to know why he was doing this. We had been brothers once. We had grown up together, shared rooms, played together as kids. What had I done to deserve this level of betrayal? Jason actually laughed. You always thought you were better than us, Hayden. Walking around with your college degree, your successful business, your expensive house. Dad was right. You needed to be brought down to our level. Needed to understand what it's like to struggle. The words hit me harder than any physical blow could have. This wasn't about money or property. This was about jealousy and resentment that had festered for years while I was blind to it. I pushed Jason away from me, just wanting him out of my space. He stumbled backward, but caught himself, didn't fall. I turned and walked away. Behind me, I heard Jason call out something about me making a big mistake. 2 days later, police knocked on my penthouse door hours before my scheduled eviction. They had a warrant for my arrest. Assault and battery charges filed by Jason Cooper. The officer showed me the police report. Jason claimed I had attacked him viciously in the bar parking lot, beating him until bystanders pulled me off. He had gone to the hospital with injuries. Black eye, broken nose, cracked rib. The report included photos of Jason's face, badly bruised and swollen. I only pushed him once, I said. I didn't hit him. I didn't break anything. The officer shrugged. That's not what the victim says. Security footage from the bar shows you pushing him, then the camera angle doesn't capture what happened next. His injuries are documented. You'll need to come with us. I was arrested and taken to county jail. Bail was set at $20,000. I had $100 to my name. No family would help me. Emily wouldn't answer calls. I had no friends left because they had all distanced themselves during the legal battles. I sat in county jail while the system processed me. A public defender was assigned, an overworked woman named Jennifer who had 12 other cases that day. She looked at my file for maybe 5 minutes before our first meeting. "The evidence looks bad," she said flatly. "You pushed him on camera. He has documented injuries. Witnesses say there was a fight. I recommend you take a plea deal. Plead guilty to simple assault. Probably get 18 months with possibility of early release for good behavior." "I'm innocent," I said. "I pushed him once and walked away. He injured himself or had someone else do it. This is a setup." Jennifer closed her folder. "It's your word against his, Mr. Cooper, and he has injuries while you don't. A jury will believe the victim with the broken nose over the defendant claiming it's a conspiracy. Take the deal." I refused. I wasn't going to plead guilty to something I didn't do, not after everything else. While I sat in jail, my world finished collapsing. The foreclosure on my penthouse completed. The bank seized the property and all my remaining possessions. Everything I owned, every photo, every memory, every piece of clothing, got sold at auction or thrown away. My entire life reduced to nothing. Jason completed selling all 11 properties. The last 7 went to various buyers connected to Marcus Vaughn's network. Total sales reached $8.7 million. After Marcus took his cut and various fees, Jason walked away with $5.2 million. He bought a mansion in the suburbs with cash. Not just any mansion, but one bigger and more expensive than the property I had originally owned. $2.7 million. He moved Dad in with him. They threw a party to celebrate, inviting the whole family. Meanwhile, I sat in a county jail cell, wearing an orange jumpsuit, eating food that tasted like cardboard, sleeping on a thin mattress that hurt my back. Rachel visited me, and we talked through the bars of a visiting area. She was still fighting, still filing motions, but the appeals process was glacially slow. The State Judicial Ethics Board had dismissed the complaint against Judge Hartman without investigation. He was too well connected, had too many friends in high places. I told Rachel to give up. What was the point? I had lost everything. My properties, my business, my home, my relationship, my freedom. Why keep fighting? "Because they're criminals and you're innocent," Rachel said firmly. "And because if we give up, they win completely. As long as we're fighting, there's still a chance." But I had no fight left in me. I was broken physically, emotionally, financially, spiritually. I had nothing. My cellmate was a man named Travis, mid-40s, in jail for tax evasion. He had been a forensic accountant before his legal troubles. Over the days we shared that cell, I told him everything. The properties, the forgery, the corrupt judge, the illegal sales, all of it. Travis listened carefully, asked detailed questions, took mental notes. One night, lying on our bunks in the dark, he said something that changed everything. "Your brother is an idiot," Travis said. "When he sold those properties as court-appointed administrator, he had to sign documents. Closing papers, transfer documents, all filed with the county recorder. Those signatures are public record." "I didn't understand at first," Travis explained. "If your brother forged your signature on that original quitclaim deed, his real signature is now on file from all those property sales. Get a handwriting expert to compare his legitimate signatures from the sales to the forged signature on your deed. If he practiced forging your signature, he probably couldn't completely eliminate his own handwriting patterns. There will be tells, habits, unconscious elements of his own signature showing up in the forgery. That was it. That was the evidence we needed. The signatures were public record, filed with the county recorder's office. No one could steal them or destroy them. They were government documents, permanently archived. I felt hope ignite inside me for the first time in months. At the 3-week mark, my assault case went to preliminary hearing. The prosecutor reviewed the bar security footage more carefully. It showed me pushing Jason once, then immediately walking away. Jason was visible in the frame for several seconds after I left, standing upright, uninjured. The prosecutor called me into an interview room. "The victim's injuries don't match the video evidence," he said. "One push doesn't cause a broken nose and cracked rib. I think Mr. Cooper injured himself after you left to strengthen his case. I'm dropping the charges." I was released that afternoon. I walked out of county jail with no home to go to, no money, no phone because I couldn't pay the bill, and only the clothes on my back that I had been wearing when arrested 3 weeks earlier. I walked to the homeless shelter downtown. I had heard about it from other men in jail. That night, I slept in a room with 40 other men, listening to snoring and coughing, lying on a cot that was somehow less comfortable than the jail bunk. This was rock bottom. I had nothing left to lose. The next morning, I went to the public library and used a computer to email Rachel. I told her about Travis's discovery, about comparing Jason's signatures from the property sales to the forged signature on the quitclaim deed. Rachel responded within an hour. "That's it. That's what we need. I'll get the county records today. I'll hire the handwriting expert with my own money. We'll file everything within 2 weeks. But you'll need to testify, and you'll need to be presentable in court." I looked down at myself. Dirty clothes, long beard, gaunt face, hollow eyes. I looked exactly like what I was, a homeless man with nothing. But for the first time in months, I had real hope, and I had nothing left to lose, which meant I could fight without fear of losing more. I spent 2 weeks living in the homeless shelter while Rachel built our case. I found day labor jobs through a service that picked up workers early each morning, moving furniture, cleaning construction sites, loading trucks. The work was hard and paid minimum wage, but it gave me enough money for food and bus fare. Every few days I met Rachel at the library. She had obtained all the property sale documents from county records, 43 different documents with Jason's signature as court-appointed administrator. She hired Dr. Elizabeth Santos, the same forensic document examiner from before, to analyze the signatures. Dr. Santos worked for a week, examining every detail under microscopes, measuring pressure patterns, analyzing the formation of individual letters. Her report was comprehensive and devastating to Jason's case. The signature on the forged quitclaim deed transferring my mansion to Jason contained unmistakable elements of Jason's own handwriting. Dr. Santos identified specific tells. The way Jason formed capital letters had unique characteristics. His pressure patterns when writing, the slight tremor in certain strokes, the angle at which he held the pen, all of these unconscious habits showed up in the forged signature. Even though Jason had tried to replicate my handwriting style, it was definitive proof that Jason had forged the document. Rachel filed a comprehensive motion to vacate Judge Hartman's orders. She included Dr. Santos's report, the county records showing Jason's legitimate signatures, detailed analysis proving the forgery. She also filed a criminal complaint with the district attorney's office against Jason for forgery, fraud, grand theft, and conspiracy. She filed a formal complaint with the State Bar Association against Brian for his role in the fraud, including evidence of his relationship with Judge Hartman and his participation in presenting forged documents to the court. The case was assigned to a new judge, Judge Caroline Pierce, because Rachel argued successfully that Judge Hartman's bias was now documented and he should be recused. Judge Pierce had a reputation for integrity and fairness. She scheduled a hearing for 3 weeks out. I started to believe we might actually win. Jason received notification of the criminal complaint and the new motion. Brian called him immediately, and they met in person. Jason was panicking. Forgery was a felony. He could face 5 to 10 years in prison. Plus, he would have to return all the money from the property sales, $5.2 million, most of which he had already spent. He had bought the mansion for $2.7 million, new cars for $200,000, luxury items, vacations, paying off debts. He had maybe $1.8 million in liquid assets left. He would lose everything and go to prison. The family held an emergency meeting at Jason's new mansion. Dad, Amber, Mom, Stephanie, and Brian joining by phone. They discussed options. Brian suggested something that made my blood run cold when I later learned about it. "What if Hayden isn't mentally competent to bring this case?" Brian said. "If you can have him declared mentally incompetent and get him institutionalized, the case dies. And no one believes the accusations of a crazy person." Jason filed an emergency petition with the court claiming I was mentally ill and a danger to myself and others. The petition cited the assault incident, even though charges had been dropped. It claimed I had been making delusional statements about owning properties I didn't own. It described my supposed harassment of family members and paranoid accusations of conspiracy. The petition included sworn affidavits from family members. Dad claimed I had always been unstable, that he worried I would hurt someone. Mom said I had shown signs of mental illness for years. Amber testified she felt threatened by me and feared for her safety. All lies, but sworn statements filed with the court. The petition pointed to my current circumstances as evidence of mental incompetence. I was homeless, unemployed, living in a shelter. I looked disheveled and unwell. These were presented as signs of inability to care for myself, rather than the natural result of having everything stolen from me. Judge Pierce reviewed the petition and ordered a competency evaluation. I had to report to the county psychiatric facility for assessment by a court-appointed psychiatrist. The hearing was scheduled for 1 week before our fraud hearing was supposed to take place. If Jason succeeded in having me declared incompetent, I would be institutionalized. Rachel's case would collapse because I wouldn't be able to testify or participate in my own defense. Everything we had worked for would be destroyed. I went to the psychiatric facility on the scheduled day. Dr. Harold Mendelsohn, a psychiatrist in his 60s with gray hair and a kind face, conducted the evaluation. He asked me questions about my life, my case, my current mental state. I explained everything calmly and rationally. I showed him documentation Rachel had given me. Dr. Santos's handwriting analysis report, property records proving my ownership, evidence of the fraud committed against me. I walked him through the timeline of events methodically. Dr. Mendelsohn asked about my current circumstances. Why was I homeless? Why did I look so unwell? I had everything taken from me illegally through a corrupt court process, I explained. I'm fighting to get it back through legitimate legal channels. That's not delusion, that's reality. I'm homeless because my home was stolen and then foreclosed on while I sat in jail on false charges. I look unwell because I've been surviving on soup kitchen meals and day labor wages. None of this is mental illness. It's the consequence of being victimized. Dr. Mendelsohn took extensive notes. He seemed skeptical of my family's claims but didn't reveal his conclusions. He told me he would submit his report to Judge Pierce before the competency hearing. I left the evaluation uncertain. What if Dr. Mendelsohn believed my family? What if I ended up institutionalized, locked away while Jason kept everything he had stolen? Rachel tried to reassure me. The evidence is too strong, she said. Your explanation is logical, documented, provable. No competent psychiatrist would declare you mentally ill based on the facts. But I had been confident before. I had trusted the system before. And the system had destroyed me. The competency hearing arrived. The courtroom was packed with family members. Jason sat in the front row looking confident. Dad sat beside him, arms crossed, expression stern. Mom, Amber, Stephanie, all there to watch me get declared crazy and locked away. Judge Pierce called the hearing to order. Brian stood and presented the family's case first. He called Mom to testify. She gave a tearful performance about her concerns for my mental health, about how I had changed over the years, about how she feared I would hurt myself or others. Dad testified next. He was stern and serious, claiming I had always been irrational and unstable, that the family had covered for me for years but could no longer protect me from myself. Amber testified that she felt threatened by me. She described feeling scared when I came near her, worried about what I might do. Her performance was convincing, emotional, completely false. Then Stephanie took the stand. She testified that I had shown up at their house at midnight, banging on the door and screaming incoherently about conspiracies. She claimed she called the police because I was so out of control. It never happened. none of it. But she delivered the lies with conviction. Rachel objected repeatedly. Judge Pierce allowed the testimony but looked increasingly skeptical. Her expression suggested she wasn't buying what she was hearing. Dr. Mendelsohn testified next. He read from his report. The subject shows no signs of mental illness, delusion, or incompetence. The subject's claims are supported by substantial documentation which I have reviewed. The subject's current circumstances appear to be the result of external actions by others rather than internal mental dysfunction. The family members' statements appear inconsistent with observed facts and documented evidence. In my professional opinion, this petition may constitute abuse of the legal system and the mental health evaluation process. I recommend the subject be found competent and the petition be dismissed. Brian tried to discredit Dr. Mendelsohn, questioning his expertise and experience. Judge Pierce shut him down firmly. As the hearing seemed to be concluding in my favor, a man stood up in the back of the courtroom. "Your Honor, I have information relevant to this case." Everyone turned to look. It was Marcus Vaughn, the shady real estate investor who had bought my properties from Jason. Judge Pierce asked who he was. Marcus identified himself and explained he was facing federal charges for unrelated real estate fraud. His attorney had advised him that cooperation in other cases could help reduce his sentence. "I'm here to tell the truth about Jason Cooper and his fraud," Marcus said. "I have documentation of everything." The courtroom erupted. Judge Pierce called for order. Marcus's attorney stood and confirmed they were offering evidence and testimony in exchange for consideration in Marcus's federal case. Marcus handed Judge Pierce a folder 3 inches thick. Inside were emails between him and Jason explicitly discussing the fraud. Text messages where Jason stated he was selling properties owned by his idiot brother. Wire transfer records showing money being split between them. Property sales documents proving the conspiracy. Everything was there. Proof of the entire scheme laid out in Jason's own words. Judge Pierce spent 10 minutes reviewing the documents while the courtroom sat in silence. When she looked up, her expression was cold fury. She declared me competent and denied the family's petition entirely. She ordered Jason to remain in the courtroom. She called the bailiff and had Jason taken into custody immediately. She set bail at $500,000 for charges of fraud, forgery, grand theft, and conspiracy. She ordered an investigation into Dad's role in the scheme. She ordered an investigation into Brian's ethical violations and potential disbarment. She ordered a full review of Judge Hartman's conduct in the original case. The family sat in shock. Dad tried to leave, but Judge Pierce ordered him to stay, warning that he could be next. Mom started crying. Amber looked terrified. I stood in that courtroom, vindicated but hollow. I had won this battle. The truth was finally exposed, but I was still homeless. My properties had been sold to third parties. The money was mostly gone. I had nothing to return to. I had won, but I wasn't sure what I had actually won. The weeks following the competency hearing moved with startling speed. Jason was held without bail after additional evidence of his crimes emerged during the initial investigation. The district attorney charged him with 15 felonies, including multiple counts of forgery, fraud, grand theft, conspiracy, and money laundering. Brian cooperated with prosecutors immediately to save his own career. He provided detailed testimony about Judge Hartman's involvement, about the forged documents, about the planned conspiracy. The State Bar Association opened formal disbarment proceedings against him, but his cooperation bought him a reduced punishment instead of complete disbarment. The FBI opened an investigation into Judge Hartman for corruption, bribery, and obstruction of justice. Within 2 weeks, Judge Hartman resigned from the bench. 1 month later, he was indicted on federal charges. His career was over, his reputation destroyed, his freedom in jeopardy. Dad was charged as a co-conspirator. Prosecutors offered him a deal: plead guilty to reduced charges, testify against Jason, pay restitution, and receive probation with house arrest instead of prison time. Dad took the deal. He pleaded guilty and received 3 years probation with the first year under house arrest. He was also ordered to pay $50,000 in restitution to me. Mom filed for divorce within days of Dad's guilty plea. She claimed she didn't know about the conspiracy, that Dad had manipulated her too. Whether that was true or just self-preservation, I didn't know and didn't care. Amber came to see me at the shelter one evening. I was sitting outside on a bench, enjoying the cool air before going in for the night. She sat beside me, not speaking at first. Finally, she said she was sorry. She admitted she had known about the plan to take the mansion, but claimed she didn't know about the forgery or the extent of Jason's crimes. She said she got caught up in family loyalty and made terrible choices. "I don't forgive you yet," I told her honestly. "Maybe someday, but not now. You watched me lose everything, and you celebrated." She nodded, tears in her eyes, and left. Rachel worked tirelessly on recovering my assets. The legal situation was complex. Jason had sold 11 properties to various buyers. Some of those buyers were part of Marcus's network and had known the sales were fraudulent. Those sales could be voided, but some properties had been sold to legitimate buyers who had no knowledge of the fraud. Those situations required lawsuits and negotiations. The court ordered Jason to return all proceeds from the property sales. He had spent most of the money, but the court seized everything he owned. His new mansion, worth $2.7 million, was taken. His cars, bank accounts, investments, everything was liquidated. The court recovered $2.3 million in liquid assets. Marcus Vaughn's federal case included seizure of his assets. His shell companies still held approximately $3 million from purchasing my properties at below-market rates. The federal court ordered that money returned to me as the rightful owner, part of Marcus's restitution for his cooperation deal. Combined, I recovered $5.3 million, not the full $8.7 million my properties had been worth, but substantial. The properties themselves were harder to recover. The buyers who had purchased from Jason in good faith had legal claims, even though Jason hadn't had authority to sell. Rachel filed lawsuits against each buyer, arguing the sales were void because Jason was only a temporary administrator without authority to sell. The legal process took 6 months. Some buyers settled, agreeing to return the properties in exchange for refunds from the seized funds. Some buyers fought and we had to go to trial. But eventually, slowly, I got all 11 properties back. The properties had increased in value during the chaos. The real estate market had gone up 15% over the year. The properties were now collectively worth $9.4 million. I made a decision. I was done being a landlord. I was done with real estate investment. I liquidated everything, selling all 11 properties at market value over a 3-month period. I walked away with $8.9 million after commissions and fees. I used part of the recovered money to rent an apartment downtown while I figured out my next steps. Not a penthouse this time, just a normal 2-bedroom apartment with reasonable rent. I didn't need luxury. I needed stability. I started a new business, but this time in a different direction. I used my painful experience to help others. I became an expert witness in real estate fraud cases, testifying about forgery, corrupt transactions, and property theft. I consulted with attorneys on similar cases. I wrote a book about my experience called The Family That Stole Everything, a True Story. The book became a regional bestseller. It brought in additional income, but more importantly, it helped others recognize signs of fraud and family manipulation. I received letters from people telling me my story had helped them protect themselves or escape similar situations. My business reputation slowly recovered. News coverage of the criminal convictions vindicated me. Former clients reached out, apologizing for abandoning me. Some offered new contracts. I was selective, only working with people and companies I trusted completely. Business partners who had voted me out of my original company asked if we could reconnect. I declined. They had shown their true character when things got difficult. I didn't need them in my life. Travis, my cellmate from jail, was released after serving his sentence for tax evasion. I hired him as a forensic consultant for my expert witness work. We became genuine friends. He had been there at my lowest point and had given me the information that saved me. That kind of loyalty meant everything. One afternoon, I ran into Emily at the same coffee shop where she had broken up with me. She approached my table hesitantly, asked if she could sit. I gestured to the empty chair. She apologized. She said she had been wrong, that she should have trusted me, that she had let my family manipulate her. She asked if we could try again. I looked at her and felt nothing. No anger, no love, no desire to reconnect. She had abandoned me when I needed support most. That wasn't the kind of partner I wanted in my life. I politely declined. I told her I appreciated the apology, but we weren't right for each other. She left looking sad but understanding. Months later, I met someone new. Her name was Lauren, and she was a social worker at the homeless shelter where I had stayed. She had been working there during my time in the shelter, had treated me with dignity and respect when I had nothing. She had seen me at my absolute lowest and hadn't judged me. We started talking when I came back to volunteer at the shelter. I spent time there regularly now, helping other homeless men get back on their feet. I used my experience to counsel them, to show them that rock bottom wasn't the end. Lauren and I started dating slowly. There was no rush. We both valued genuine connection over grand gestures. She understood what I had been through, because she had witnessed part of it. I made peace with Amber eventually. She genuinely apologized multiple times, admitted her role in everything, and made real efforts to make amends. We would never be as close as siblings should be, but we reached a point where we could talk without anger. I had no contact with Dad. He served his house arrest, paid his restitution, and stayed away from me. That was fine. Some relationships aren't worth salvaging. Jason remained in prison. He was convicted on 12 of the 15 felony charges and sentenced to 8 years. He would serve at least 5 before being eligible for parole. I didn't visit him, didn't write to him, didn't think about him unless necessary. Mom tried reaching out several times through Amber. She wanted to apologize, to explain, to reconnect. I wasn't ready, maybe someday, but not yet. The wound was too deep. The legal system finally delivered complete justice, 18 months after that terrible Sunday dinner. Jason's appeals were denied. Judge Hartman pleaded guilty to federal corruption charges and received a 4-year prison sentence. Brian was suspended from practicing law for 5 years. Dad completed his house arrest and disappeared from my life entirely. I had recovered financially beyond what I had lost. The $8.9 million from selling the properties, combined with income from my expert witness work and book sales, meant I was more financially secure than ever before. But I was different now. Money meant less. Security meant less. What mattered was integrity, genuine relationships, and purpose. I bought a modest house in a quiet neighborhood. 3 bedrooms, nice yard, nothing extravagant. I furnished it simply. Lauren helped me pick out furniture, and we made the space feel like a real home rather than an investment property. My consulting business thrived in unexpected ways. Attorneys across the state sought my expertise on fraud cases. I testified in court regularly, helping other victims of property theft and family manipulation get justice. Each case I won felt like vindication not just for me but for everyone who had been wronged by people they trusted. The book continued to sell steadily. Publishing companies approached me about writing a follow-up. I was considering it. Maybe a practical guide for protecting yourself from family fraud. Something that could help people avoid what I went through. I volunteered at the homeless shelter every week. I ran a support group for men rebuilding their lives after major setbacks. I shared my story honestly, holding nothing back. I talked about the shame of being homeless, the despair of losing everything, the struggle to keep fighting when hope seemed gone. Men in that room understood because they were living it. Travis became not just a business partner but one of my closest friends. We had lunch every week, talking about cases, life, recovery. He understood the journey from rock bottom to stability because he had made it himself. Lauren and I grew closer slowly and naturally. She moved into my house after we had been dating for 10 months. We talked about marriage but weren't rushing. We had both learned that the important things couldn't be forced or hurried. Amber and I rebuilt something, resembling a sibling relationship. We met for coffee once a month. Conversations were sometimes awkward, but we were trying. She had started therapy to understand her role in the family dysfunction. She was working on herself, and I respected that. Uncle Frank reached out to apologize. He explained that he had genuinely not known I owned the duplex he had lived in. He felt terrible about the misunderstanding during the crisis. I forgave him. He had been a victim too, caught in Jason's scheme without knowledge or consent. Several other family members apologized as the truth fully came out. Some apologies I accepted, some I didn't. I learned that forgiveness was mine to give or withhold, and I didn't owe it to anyone who hadn't genuinely earned it. My credit score recovered completely. The foreclosure on the penthouse fell off my record as part of the court's remediation orders. Banks that had reported delinquent accounts corrected their records. Financially and legally, I was restored. But the real restoration was internal. I had learned what mattered. I had learned who I could trust. I had learned that material success without integrity was worthless. I had learned that losing everything could teach you what you should have valued all along. The mansion Jason had tried to steal? I was glad it was gone. That house represented a version of me that had focused on achievement and acquisition. The modest house I lived in now represented something better. A life built on purpose and relationships rather than possessions and status. I thought about that Sunday dinner sometimes. Dad's voice declaring that Jason needed my house more. The moving trucks already parked outside. My family's faces when they thought they had won. If I could go back to that moment, would I change anything? No. The pain led to growth. The loss led to clarity. The betrayal revealed true character, both theirs and mine. I wouldn't choose to go through it again, but I wouldn't undo it either. I learned that family isn't just blood. It's who stands beside you when everything falls apart. It's who treats you with dignity when you have nothing. It's who believes in you when the world says you're wrong. Travis was family. Lauren was family. Rachel was family. They had earned that title through actions, not genetics. I learned that justice exists, but sometimes you have to fight like hell to find it. The system failed me initially because of corruption and manipulation, but eventually, truth prevailed. It took longer than it should have. It required more suffering than was fair, but justice came. I learned that losing everything can teach you what really matters. When I had the properties and the business and the mansion, I thought I had success. When I had nothing but integrity and determination, I discovered I had something more valuable. Material wealth comes and goes. Character is permanent. Now I have less money than at my peak, but more peace. I have fewer properties, but more purpose. The mansion is gone, but I sleep better in my modest house than I ever did in that empty showplace. I wake up next to someone who loves me for who I am, not what I own. I spend my days helping people instead of accumulating things. Sometimes you have to lose everything to find what you should have been looking for all along. I stood in my backyard last Sunday, watching Lauren plant flowers in the garden bed she had designed. Travis was coming over later for dinner. Amber had called to check in, our monthly conversation that was slowly becoming easier. My life was full in ways that mattered. The properties were gone. The business I had built was gone. The family I thought I had was gone. But what remained was real, solid, earned. And that was worth more than 11 properties or $8.7 million or a mansion with 7 bedrooms. I had lost everything and gained what truly mattered. And I wouldn't trade that lesson for anything in the world. Now I want to ask you something. Have you ever had someone you trusted betray you in a way that changed your whole life? How did you recover? Did you find that losing something forced you to discover what really mattered? Share your story in the comments below. Your experience might help someone else who's going through their own battle right now. If this story resonated with you, if it made you think about trust and family and what real success means, please hit that like button. Subscribe to hear more stories about real people overcoming impossible situations. And share this with someone who needs to hear that rock bottom isn't the end. It's sometimes the beginning of something better. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it reminded you that integrity matters more than wealth, that true family is defined by loyalty rather than blood, and that justice, though it may take time, is worth fighting for. Keep pushing forward, even when everything seems lost. Your breakthrough might be closer than you think.